Mhm, 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 mhm. I will say that the Ray Shindlin book I think is just very good. It's short, it's concise, it gives basic overview of Jewish history in like 100 pages, whatever it is, 150 pages. There are many one-volume histories of the Jewish people that are amazing. They're all like 800 pages, as you can imagine. And of course, then you have Salo Baron's history, which is I think 14, 15 volumes. Um, so we have a lot of sources on Jewish history, which is very interesting because that's basically something new um, in Judaism. Jews did not really study history until the modern period. There are obviously historical works, and we're going to look at that tonight with the Bible. Um, but you know, the Bible, on the one hand, the Bible is not a history book. This is the problem we have with fundamentalists, is that the Bible isn't a historical or a scientific work. On the other hand, there are historical events in the book, and it's important to acknowledge that some of the events as described in the Bible are are of historical nature, and they may very well be accurate, although it's really hard to tell. One of the problems with biblical history is we just don't have enough verification from outside sources or archaeological evidence. There is a lot of archaeology from the biblical period. That's something that Israel has excelled in. But archaeology can basically tell you about how the people lived. It can tell you maybe a moment of social history. It's very hard to identify political history or even verify the authority of the texts. There's been controversy, and it becomes, of course, a political controversy. Some of the materials that have been found by archaeologists, do they really uh, mention David? Is that correct? Is that an accurate reading of the archaeology? And people go back and forth because it's not so clear, and then it becomes a political football because anti-Israel archaeologists want to argue that there is no such thing as early Israelite history. The earliest Jews are in this area are a much, much later date. There is no proof for King David or King Solomon, whereas those obviously who are supportive of Israel's ancient references to Israel's standing in the land of Israel are going to argue, oh no, this is clearly a reference to King David, and this verifies some of the material that we see in the Book of Kings. In any case, so it's very hard. It's very hard to uh, speak of the accurate history of the Bible, um, and uh, yet we know that there are historical, but it's hard to talk about the Bible without talking about the history of it. The earliest reference we have to Israel as a people is on what's known as the Merneptah Stele, which was a circa 1220 BCE. So this is much after the stories of uh, Abraham and the patriarchs. 1220 BCE, the reference on the stele is it's actually very interesting because the reference is not to a nation but to a people, as I understand it. That there's a certain way that on the stele they refer to groups that are nation status and groups that are like peoplehood. And so that's an interesting reference because at this point in history, Israel wasn't really yet, it certainly wasn't a nation yet. We talk about Moses approximately being 1300s of before the Common Era. So so 1220, you wouldn't have Israel wouldn't be certainly King David, King Solomon are come after 1220. Nevertheless, if you read the chapter by Ray Shinlin on the history of the Israelite history, um, he mentions that the actual, despite what the Torah tells us is how the Jewish people, the Israelite people, came into existence, it's very possible that it was some kind of a coalition of nomadic tribes in Canaan who settle, and an eclectic group that escapes or comes from Egypt, um, others who came from Mesopotamia, and they established this kind of united group in the land of Israel. And the way you connect these disparate groups is you tell stories, and you tell stories of how they came from their origin points, but then they blend into a common group. Um, so so that's what again, ancient historians will suggest how the origins. It's speculation. We don't know. We can't know exactly how the Israelites actually were created. Nachum Sarna, who's a great Bible scholar, um, insists that there is some historical resonance to the patriarchal stories, because his argument is most nations don't uh, talk about their founders in such, in less than positive terms, right? We have stories about Abraham, and he shills his wife off to the Egyptian pharaoh to save his neck. Not too honorable. Isaac is fooled by his children, picks the wrong kid to be the next leader. Jacob has, is all types of stories about Jacob being a con man, um, and so that's his argument, that there must be some kernel of truth that these Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob characters were real people. But admittedly, that's a little, we don't know. I mean, we just don't have any evidence. Rabbi David Wolpe, gave a sermon which was very controversial years ago, in which he insisted that the whole Moses story and the whole story of the journey to the land of Israel from Egypt, let's be honest, it's all made up. There's no truth to it. And what was his evidence for making that claim? It's not only his, obviously he's getting it from other scholars, is that there's no archaeological evidence in the Sinai desert to prove that, well, it certainly wasn't 2 million people, but even any group of people, we don't have any archaeological evidence that people were traveling there. To which Jacob Milgrom, great Bible scholar, argued that that's an argument, that's a negative argument. Just because you haven't found something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, or perhaps that after 2,000 years, no, I guess it'd be 3,000 years, that it didn't disappear. It just, we don't have the opportunity to find those items that might prove the reality of the group. So you go back and forth. So that's why I want to, in these classes on history, I really want to focus more on what were the great ages and what were the great events and the ideas that occurred during these periods. And especially when it comes to the Bible, I'm going to follow Yechezkel Kaufman's article. Some of you, if any of you were with me for my class on great ages and ideas of the Jewish people, which is another wonderful book. It's a little dated because it's from the 50s, but it's 6 great Jewish historians writing about these various periods of history. And Yechezkel Kaufman is one of the great early biblical scholars and ancient Israel scholars, has a very long essay about what made Israelite religion so unique and what makes the Bible unique and what are the, especially in light of history and other nations. So that's what I really wanted to focus on tonight. And Kaufman begins by explaining that what's unique in Israelite religion is the idea, the creation of one God, this monotheistic idea that has no roots in polytheistic civilization, he argues. And that from this idea of monotheism, it developed a culture, a new sphere of culture that made all the difference in the world. And we talked a little bit about this when we way back when we started and we did our theology section. That the basis of pagan religion is, it's not about praying to a stone, and saying this is our God. That even Israelite, the Israelite prophets and those who were attacking paganism understood that. But that it's the deification of natural phenomena. That to the pagan, all manifestations of nature are divine powers, aspects of a mysterious supernatural vitality. Now, we should say, because we did talk a little bit about this, I think we hit on this during our theology talks, that pantheism, which is what we call pagan theology, which is, again, the manifestation of, with ascribing divine powers to all manifestations of nature, is different than what we call panen theism, Panen theism, in which is what many Jewish mystics held by, which is that everything is God. So it's not that the tree is one aspect of has a divine nature, and the river has a divine nature, and all of these things, and weather, the spring has divine aspect to it, but rather all of the world, you, me, the world outside, nature, we're all element of the divine. So that's a little bit different. The pagans believed that ascribed these powers to individual elements of nature, and that underneath it all was that that multiplicity was fundamental to paganism, and it serves to symbolize its basic idea that the subjection of everything, including deities, are to a transcendent primeval realm. So, right, even we know from the Greek myths and such, right? The Greek, first of all, we have all of these pagan religions. They all have stories of how their gods came to be, because their gods came from somewhere, from something that was prior to the god, and even the gods were subject to fate, whereas Israelite religion asserted that the will of God is transcendent and it's sovereign over all. Israelite religion does not subject the deity to a primeval realm or to any kind of imposed pattern. Its primary category, differing fundamentally from that of paganism, is the absolute freedom of the God. The Adonai Elohim can do anything, and the world exists because of the will of the God. It liberates the Godhead from mythological and magical subjection. Israelite religion has no theogony. There's no story of how the God created, right? That's the unique thing about the Torah. It begins, the world was tohu vavohu. It was total chaos. God said, let there be light. Well, who's this God? Where did the God come from? Doesn't tell us. because that's not important. God is completely free. God is not contingent, connected, dependent on anything. So that was the unique idea that of within Israelite religion. That's the unique monotheistic view. And then Kaufman goes on to say Israelite religion replaced the mythological wars of the gods with the historical struggle of man against the word of God. God's antagonist is the human person, in whom God implanted the freedom to rebel as the necessary concomitant of endowing the human person with free will and making the human a mortal creature. So the idea that, so what Israel really does, or Israelite religion, earlier Israelite religion does, the Bible does, is it transforms the war of good and evil, of willfulness and rebellion. It transforms it from forces outside the human person to within the human person. And so it's our will against God. But the irony, in a sense, is that it's God who gave us the will in the first place, because giving us that will allows us to be mortal. I just finished his Dark Materials. I read the book years and years ago. I don't know if any of you ever read it. It's a fascinating fantasy, very creative fantasy. My problem with it always is that, because Philip Pullman has an issue with Catholicism, it's not my problem, but he wants pretty much a rant against Catholicism. But the irony at the end of the book is that the young girl character who's supposed to be the new Eve. They make the end of the story, you come to realize that Eve, again relating to our character Adam and Eve is not the bad guy, right? The one who caused sin to enter the world, because she took the fruit, she took the advice from the serpent, and she ate the fruit she wasn't supposed to eat, and then she gave it to Adam, and she messed everything up. No, the opposite. And I think to some extent you can argue this in Jewish, the way Judaism looks at it, and the way we're talking about it right now, is that Eve is the hero, because by rebelling, by not observing the rule that God had given Adam and Eve, that turns Adam and Eve into real human beings. Had they not disobeyed the rule, we would be like the animals. We're sitting around doing nothing but eating and procreating and having no history. It's Eve and her lead in disobeying, which gives the human person the total free will that God had really endowed us with from the beginning. Okay, so it's interesting. If you never read the Dark Materials, it's an interesting read. Okay. But the next development in the Israelite religion is, of course, the stories. We're beginning it this week in the synagogue, the book of Exodus. And again, Kaufman notes that in the story of the burning bush, there thus appears at once and for the first time those features that would provide the historical framework for Israelite monotheism throughout all the ages. We get a name of this God. Actually, we had the name in Genesis, but it's at the burning bush that God says, "This is my name," to Moses. We get the notion in the book of Exodus of the people of Israel. It's not a clan anymore of Jacob, his sons, and their descendants. It's now a people. And for the first time in the book of Exodus, we hear that term, Am Yisrael, people of Israel. The idea, the concept of the election of Israel, that Israel is special. This nation of Israel, this people of Israel, are special to God, partially because of their connection to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to whom God made all these promises, But it's different here in the book of Exodus. It's the people of Israel are special. God refers to Israel as my firstborn, meaning that there are other nations are under divine providence as well, but we're number one. We're the firstborn. What he calls the apostolic prophecy, that is a single prophet who receives the word of God and then shares it. And finally, the battle with heathendom, um, fighting off idolatry, and that becomes a major theme through the rest of the books of the Bible, where Israel is constantly battling with this between this now new religion that has been given it, of the monotheistic religion, and the paganism, the heathendom that exists in the rest of the world. And Israel is constantly pulled between these two. We have, of course, the next stage in this development is also the covenant at Sinai. In the Bible, in the book of Genesis, we have covenants. We have Noah, Abraham makes a covenant with God, but the covenant made at Sinai is unique, because now the Jewish people have a set of rules, a set of directives by which they're supposed to observe. So that changes. It's a national covenant, unlike the one between Abraham. It's broader than the covenant with Noah. It's much more specific, and it's also specific to the Jewish people, or to the Israelite people. It's hard to know exactly when we start talking about Judaism and separating it from Israelite religion, but the covenant at Sinai is specifically for that people, the Am Yisrael. We also have throughout the Bible, at least in the priestly sections, we have all of these rituals. And Kaufman is emphasizes this over and over again, that even though if you look at the rituals, the sacrifices, the pageantry that's described, the scapegoat for Yom Kippur, all these things, even the language used sounds like pagan rituals, right? The language you're making, sometimes the offerings are referred to as lechem, which is, in modern Hebrew, it's bread, but it means food. The sanctuary, which they eventually develop as a place where the humans can interact with God, or at least the prophet can interact with God directly, is set up like an apartment. It's got a little table in there. It's got a place to cook the food. And it seems like it's, again, like these pagan, where the pagans are feeding the gods. But he makes it very clear, and so does Jacob Milgrom, a more modern scholar of Bible, that no Israelite ritual is thought of ever as affecting the life or the vitality of God. That's a big difference. No ceremony is intended to protect the god or man from the destructive power of the demonic. And he says here, the most remarkable features of the priestly code is its new conception of impurity. In the pagan world, impurity was viewed as a supernatural force. But in the priestly code, impurity has no power at all. It could pollute the sacred space, but it could also be cleansed. So it's not that some kind of demonic force enters the world if you've polluted it. It's, you got to clean it up. You have to, and that's what some of the ceremonies were about. In Yom Kippur, the scapegoat ritual was to cleanse the people of their spiritual impurities. And even though, again, a lot of resonance from earlier pagan cultures, where you have the What is the goat goes to Azazel? Well, Azazel is obviously some kind of a pagan name for a place where the demons live, but that's not how it's understood in the sources. So they use the language of other cultures, but the meaning isn't the same. And so there isn't this demonic force that must be removed or fought against, but rather it is the spiritual impurity which our bad behavior um, causes, pollutes, dirties the the holy spaces, and they have to be cleansed. So that's another notion that develops from this monotheistic cult. Now, historically, the who are the leaders of the Jewish people in the Bible in these early periods? Well, we have the beginning is obviously Moses, which again he calls this apostolic prophet. It's a singular leader. After Moses, we have a period known as the Judges, um, and they're not really what we think of judges. When we hear that term judges, you usually think of a court or something, but these were basically military leaders who arose whenever there was a need. So it was a very loose confederation. It was the tribes, a loose confederation of the tribes, who once at least according to the Torah's story, the people have conquered under Joshua the land of Israel, and they're now living in this land. Um, they split the land according to the tribal groups, and when there was a need, one leader would arise and pull the tribes together. It would be a charismatic leader, a military leader. Um, why do these bad things happen? Why do they need this leader to arise? Because Israel doesn't follow the rules that God gave them. So it's their sins that cause these problems. And that's something that else we see in the biblical world, is that bad things happen to Israel because they, as a corporate entity, don't follow the rules. The Judges period, so the book of Judges, for the most part, is actually pro-monarchy, because it points out the deficiency of the judge system. First of all, you got to wait for, there's nobody in charge until there's a crisis, and then the leader emerges. But there's no coordination. There's not the tribes are sometimes fighting with each other. They can't respond. The people themselves, the tribal groups, can't respond properly to enemies. So the book of Judges seems to be very pro-monarchy, although even in the book of Judges, there are passages in which the idea of monarchy is questioned. The son of Gideon, his brother basically wipes out everybody to become the one leader. And his brother, who survives and runs away, has a whole soliloquy about, this is not a good system. To having one king is just very dangerous. So there's kind of a balancing in the book of Judges, but for the most part, it points out the deficiency of the judge system. And so we move on, and starting in the book of Samuel, we get the history of the kings. Saul is the first king, and he is militarily successful, but he's very unstable personality. He loses the kingship because, again, he doesn't follow he's dependent on the prophet Samuel, and he doesn't follow Samuel's warnings. So he loses his place, and he yields to David, one of his warriors. David is very popular. He's a popular warrior among the people. And David's strength is that and this is the strength of the monarchy, he ties together the various tribes. So there's a a natural kind of north-south split, even at this time, at least according to these sources. Um, there's a north-south split. The northern tribes are comprised of 10 tribes, Ephraim being the largest. Um, and sometimes Ephraim goes by the name of Israel. And then the southern tribes, which are just two, Judah and Benjamin, which are very large tribes. Judah and Benjamin are the southern tribes, and that's where we get the name Jews from Judah, because Judah is the strongest in the south. David ties these together, subdues his enemies. He's followed by his son Solomon, who, again, there's some evidence that these were real people and that they did lead the country and tie the country together. Solomon's reign is larger, or his area of reign. He expands the boundaries of Israel. It's a tranquil period. He develops commerce and culture. Solomon's links, though, and this is again reading between the lines in the text. Solomon links to pagan cultures, brings down his household. It destabilizes the kingship. In the stories, it's that he married all these women. He made political alliances through marriage with, I think it was thousands, which would keep you very busy. But in any case, the texts are somewhat critical of Solomon, at least at the end of his life, and because after his death, his son is not a strong leader, and those north-south divisions arise again. And so in 922, this is the first date we have, really, that I can give you, 922 BCE, we have a split in the north led by, according to the biblical text, Jeroboam, who is not part of the Davidic line. He's a usurper, and the descendants of David and Solomon in the south. Now, this kingdom period lasts for about 200 years. So the kingdom, the period of pre-David, King Saul, even the Judges period, I guess, to the end of Solomon's reign is around 200 years. And after that, we have a succession of kings who rule, and basically none of them are very honorable. None of them are great models. We have a few examples that at least the Torah tells us they were honorable. But what's so interesting is that some archaeologists suggest that some of the kings who the Torah, the Bible, determines are wicked must have been very powerful kings, because the nation, the archaeological finds during their period, supposed reign, was great. So it's just very interesting to note that the historical evidence, as much as archaeologists have it, is that some of the periods of tranquility and growth, economic growth in ancient Israel, does not match up with the Bible's assessment of these kings. They were considered evil, but again, the evidence shows they may have been very powerful. But of course, that leads to the period of the prophets, the literary prophets. There's former prophets and later prophets, as they're called in biblical, among the prophetic books. The former prophets do not have their own books. The former prophets are like Elijah, Elisha, and they um, are usually in confrontation with the kings during this time. Um, and Then we have the literary prophets, who are the ones, meaning those are the prophets who have books named after them. The books are supposedly their oracles. Um, and just as an example of how the literary prophets um, would assess, their assessment of the success of the kings, and from our perspective, oh, the king must have been a really successful king if there was wealth in the country, growth, expansion of boundaries. Well, prophets like Amos, who prophesies to the northern tribes, the northern kingdom, is, well, that's not good, because it's and the allusions in Amos are all about, your wealth has corrupted you, and people are suffering, and you, the wealthy, don't really care. You take advantage, you exploit. And this is the growth of the literary prophets, where they stand against, very often, the kings. More dates I'll give you. All right, so the some of the early prophets, the literary prophets like Amos, Hosea, they speak against the northern tribes, the northern kingdom, I should say, the northern kingdom called Israel. In 721, their prophecies of doom come true, unless the doom came first and the prophetic books were written afterwards, which is a possibility. But in 721, the Assyrian Empire defeats the northern tribes. And that leads to a dispersion of those tribes. The whole myth of the 10 lost tribes comes from here. Most likely there weren't lost tribes. What happened is they either assimilated into the cultures around them, or they escaped to the south, to Judah. But that was in 721. About 150 years later, the remaining Jewish kingdom, Judah, is defeated by the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire is significant. The Babylonian defeat is very, very significant for a number of reasons. One, they destroy the temple. That is very, very catastrophic, right? Not catastrophic only in terms of the death, but and the loss of independence, but catastrophic theologically. What do? You don't have a temple anymore. Maybe the Babylonians and their religion, their gods, are more powerful. Also, the Babylonians have a different strategy than the Assyrians. Instead of just forcing all these people into exile, the Babylonians export the populations in the land of Israel back to Babylonia. So they exile these populations from their nation. So a lot of Jews, including the leadership, ends up in Babylonia. This is significant because this is the beginning of what we call the diaspora. You now have Jews living in Babylonia, and they live there for about 50 years, a significant portion of the population, until the Babylonians' empire is defeated by the Persians. The Persians have a different approach to ruling subjected populations. All of these empires, the whole point is to exploit and colonize these populations for their benefit. Well, so the Babylonians export the people and mix and match populations so they can better stay in control of these areas. The Persians want the natives to go back to their native population. They want reunification. Why? Because it's easier for them to uh, collect the taxes that they want. So they encourage the Jews to return to the land of Israel, to the province, to what they're now calling the province of Judea. And they want the Jews to rebuild the temple, which does start, but it really doesn't take off for a while. So from 530 something till 440, the temple is not rebuilt. They have permission to rebuild it. They start, but they don't really finish, and the community is very demoralized. um, and it's not until 440 before the Common Era that Nehemiah, who is a Jewish courtier and is appointed the governor, the political leader, he's appointed the governor of Judah, and he reestablishes religious institutions with the help of Ezra, who is a scribe. He's known as Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe. It seems, though, that he wasn't just a scribe, but that probably the term scribe, or the function of scribe, was a very important religious function at this time. So we've gone from a period of kings as leaders to to judges first, these temporary spur of the moment, I guess you call them, leaders who arise when there's a need, to the king. During this time, there's also prophets. Sometimes the prophets are what you'd call like house prophets. They supposedly speak the word of God, but they really tell the king what he wants to hear. The literary prophets are the ones who are pushing onto the kings this demand for morality, moral primacy, following the teachings of earlier teachings of within the Israelite religion, and most importantly, subservience to God and these rules that God has given to the people, to the covenant, submission to the covenant. So there's tension between the kings and the prophets, and then but by the time 440, after the destruction of the temple, we should say something else about what follows the destruction of the temple. In Babylonia, you have a number of prophets right before or right as the destruction is occurring, and then in Babylonia, Ezekiel and the prophet we call second Isaiah. It's very clear in the book of Isaiah that there's at least two prophets speaking, because it's the historical references that the two prophets are living at very, very different times. So the latter part of the book of Isaiah is clearly from a different prophet who's living in Babylonia, just like Ezekiel is. And it's their teaching which is essential to the continuation of the Jewish people. That the destruction of the temple and the defeat of Israel did not occur because God was weak, but rather, once again, because the Israel didn't follow God's directives. And so, on the one hand, you can say, wow, that's, very, very harsh to hear. It's my fault that I've been stripped of my land and carried off to another land and living in poverty. But on the other hand, it gives that Israelite person agency. Oh, so if we just behave properly, then we'll be given opportunities to correct this, right? That we have the strength, we have the ability to fix this problem. If it's the result of Adonai being this weak God, then you're kind of stuck, where it's over. But if it's my fault, or not my personal fault, it's really corporate Israel's fault, then we can work together, we can unify, and we can overcome this, and all we have to do is behave properly. And so Israelite religion at this point changes from tribal, land-based, ritual-based to more universal. God is God of the entire world. We Jews are chosen, right? We're the elected, but nevertheless, this God is God of the entire world. God is the one who empowered the Babylonians to defeat us, and now God has taken that away from the Babylonians. So that it gives. So it's more universalistic. It is also no longer land-based. You can be a Jewish or a Jew Israelite, whatever we want to call the members of the people of Israel at this time. You can be part of that people and part of that covenant outside the land of Israel. And finally, again, with the help of, with the importance of Ezra, the scribe, Judaism begins to focus on as a textual based faith, not ritual. So most people believe that at some point the Torah, as we have it today, was started to be developed under the authority of Ezra. In the book of Nehemiah, we have an event that occurs. First day of the new year, was it 444, was it? Let me go to my other text here. I think it's 444. Where is it? Here we go. Well, it's either 440 or 444. That Nehemiah, Ezra, under the leadership of Nehemiah, the political leader, reads the here we go, 444, Rosh Hashanah, 444. Ezra reads the completed Torah before the assembled throng. Now, most likely it wasn't the Torah that we have today, because it's very likely that there were additions and changes made. But there was something that he put together. I should have mentioned that during the period of the kings, one of the good kings after King David and King Solomon was Josiah. And Josiah lives before the Babylonians destroy the temple. And again, this is a text that we have in the book of Kings. While he is king, a book is found that has various rules in it, a book of the Torah, we're told, that they had lost, and it was rediscovered. So for all these years, they hadn't been following the information in this book. Most scholars believe that this was a version of the book of Deuteronomy. It's not clear whether it was found or whether it was written during the period of Josiah, because one of the unique features of the book of Deuteronomy is the centrality of Jerusalem. So the assumption is that the book was put together after Jerusalem was the center of the country, the center of the ritual cultic life. And I bring that up. Oh, so why that's important is this is the beginning of following a text as the source of religious truth. Because the Josianic reforms during this period of the 600s is to create within Am Yisrael a focus on a book. Oh my goodness, we have to follow the book to know what to do. So here we come 100 years later, a little more than 100 years later, with Ezra, who brings this Torah book back to the land of Israel. And this is the next stage in the development of the religion of the people of Israel, is that you have now the book is going to be the directive. Now they do eventually rebuild the temple during this time, and the cultic practices begin all over again. But nevertheless, you now have a book, you have a Torah book that becomes sacred. And as time goes by, more texts are added to the canon, the prophetic books, the later history books, that we would, you know, Joshua, Judges, books of Samuel and Kings, which also have, they have a description of of these early prophets, the literary prophets, and then of course some of the books of what we call the Hagiographa, which is made up. It's the third section of our Bible, which are the various other books like the Book of Ruth, the Book of Esther, and such later books. So we have, but the centrality of the Holy Book develops. Let's see, how much more do we go? Okay, so Kaufman then talks about, now that the people are back in the land, this is now in the 400s, 300s, that Israelite religion continued to be very fertile and creative throughout the period of the Second Temple. And in spite of appearances, the direction of the creativeness was universalistic. Indeed, the Judaism of this age, he says, attained heights of universalism beyond anything achieved in the pre-exilic period. So it's becoming more of a universal religion, even though, yes, but there's this balance. Jewish people are the elect, special. We have a special relationship with God. Jewish people have the responsibility of observing the covenant and the various rules in the covenant, and yet Judaism is also universal. Let's see, when did he say the first? I think according to Kaufman, what's interesting is the first mentioning of converts. Does he say it here? Or is it in Babylonia? I'm trying to find my notes here. Certainly it was around this time. If it wasn't Babylonian, then it was certainly during the time of Ezra, where you have people joining the Jewish faith. Oh, I think he does say it's in Babylonia, because there's a reference to, in Isaiah, second Isaiah, to those people who are Yirei Hashem. They're God-fearers, which are distinct from priests, Levites, Israelites, and Yirei Elohim, Yirei Shamayim, those people who are fear heaven, and fear God. So they're somehow attached to the Jewish people. So that's a new development, and that's what he's emphasizing here, is the universalism. People can start to join the Jewish people. So even though the Jewish people are separate from everybody else, from all the other peoples, you can join. That's also something unique that didn't exist in the ancient world. You just kind of you blended into whatever culture you were in, and you exchanged your gods for their gods. Or maybe you blended the gods and you added some more gods to the pantheon. But during this period of time, Jews are beginning to bring people into the faith. The end of the biblical period coincides with the story of Hanukkah, the Hasmonean period, which is about 142 to 76 BCE. May actually go a little bit longer, where we have this literature of prophetic visions, but they're a little bit, these books that are created during this period do not end up in our canon. They do end up in the Catholic Bible, the Apocrypha, but they're Jewish books, or originally written in Hebrew. Um, Although I think some of them actually may have been originally written in Greek. Yeah, like the Book of Maccabees. Some of the Book of Maccabees were originally written in Greek, but they were clearly written by Jewish authors, Jewish Hellenists. Um, and these uh, these writers, these authors, are authors of a new type of literature. Um, we get the idea in some of these books, and this develops into Rabbinic Judaism, of a messianic redeemer. Um, that there's a person, right? A person who is related to the last great redeemer, the king, King David. So it's a descendant of King David who will come and arise and save the people. A little bit like the Arthurian legends. Um, Also, we see in this period, and we talked about this, I think. Oh, we talked about this when we were talking about death. The idea of life after death arises during this period. Um, According to again, Kaufman's explanation is death seemed to put a limit on divine justice. It appeared to remove the human person from the realm of divine retribution to beyond God's reach, and that thought drove him to despondency. Now, when we talked about death last time, we said that this was an idea that was imported from Hellenistic culture, that the Greeks in their literature talk about the life after death, um, and and Jews start to buy into it. Now Kaufman has a different approach. He says, no, it comes naturally. It's a natural outgrowth from basic Jewish theology at this time. That um, God is the God of justice. God controls retribution. You know, if you do wrong, you get punished. If you do good, you get rewarded. If Israel doesn't follow the rules, they get punished with exile or destruction. If they follow the rules, they get they're able to return to the land. Um, but death, therefore, seems unfair. If you've done, um, you lived a good life. Well, I guess you could go in either direction. You lived a good life and you die at a young age, or you die because the Syrian Greeks are forcing people to leave to break the covenant, right? You eat pork or give pagan sacrifices, and you don't, and you die. Then where's the justice? On the other hand, people who do terrible things and they die, where's the retribution? So this, according to him, is the origin of the belief in afterlife within the religion of Am Yisrael. Um, what else can we say? Okay, so again, using Kaufman as for following Kaufman's approach in this post-biblical literature of Judaism becomes ascendant in this kind of post-biblical literature. We have this idea um, of these various ideas have coalesced into something very different from where we started with the Bible and biblical beliefs, and it's developed into what we now call Judaism. Here's where he says, yeah, proselytism is a uniquely Jewish innovation. There's no parallel to it in the ancient world. So this is the development of from Israel to Judaism, Israelitism, I guess you call it, to Judaism. And this is some of the important ideas and ages and events in the biblical world. Oh, gosh, I forgot. No, I mentioned that, right? I mentioned that the dates, the key dates again, just so that we know, are 721, the destruction of the northern tribes, 586 if I didn't give the exact date, 586 was the date when Babylonia destroys the temple and the people are exiled. Um, and then around 539, was it? Sometime in around 539, the Persians defeat the Babylonians, and 516 is when the temple, the rebuilding of the temple is completed. But it's not until 444 that Ezra shows up a little bit earlier, but 444 is when Ezra reads this proto-Torah to the people, and Judaism becomes a people of the book. So that's some of the key ideas, some of the important ideas developed in the biblical period. And next week, we'll look at Judaism during the Hellenistic period, which is really the rabbinic period, or at least the beginning of the rabbinic period, and discuss that. All right. I don't know. It's 8:30, so I don't know if any people have any questions about this period of time. Okay. All right. Well, then let's use it, a little bit of time that we have left, to review some. Come on, where is the... Let's pull up our... Where is it? Wait a minute. Ah. Wait a minute. All right. Here we go. Okay. All right. Let's share the screen. Okay. I don't know what this is. I hope everybody got the new syllabus that I sent out. It's the last. We've got, I guess, after tonight, we've got 6 more classes. So we'll finish up with the history material, and then we'll have the last class where, again, any questions. I want to talk about, being Jewish in the world today, which has become a little more complicated, but it is important to discuss. In some ways, in some ways, it's what it is. The more things change, the more they stay the same. History, if it doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. All these statements, because the very the type of conflicts that we've mentioned a little bit, we touched on a little bit in tonight's class, between Jews, and of course, when we talked about Hanukkah, we spoke about the conflicts of Jews during the Hasmonean period, and throughout time, Jews are always fighting with each other. So it's a little bit, in some ways, today it's not that different, disagreements between Jews than it's always been, but there are different types of disagreements. But we'll talk about that as we get closer on that last week. All right, now let's see, where were we? We got the Shin. I'm pretty sure we did Sin. I don't know if anybody remembers where we left off. I forget. I think we did Yud, because we talked in the Vav, because Yud and Vav are sometimes connected to vowels. I think we finished off on Nun. Nice and neat. I'm not really sure how that's I guess it, well, I don't know. And the final Nun is it looks like the regular Nun, but it's just straight. It goes below the line. It's one of the letters that goes below the line, like some of the other final letters. Nun is a little, again, the letters that look like nun, sometimes the gimel, the g, let's see if I can find a gimel in here, because the gimel is the one with a gap. Oh, come on. And the vav, because here's the vav, it's straight, it doesn't have the little base like the nun does. The gimel had that gap. It looked like two little legs, where here it's a base. And the kaf, I don't know if we've gotten the kaf yet, so we'll put that off. All right, so here we go. Let's just review nun. You can say along with me. Na, ne, ne, ni, no, nu, nu. Okay, again, a lot of the vowels are, similar sounding, but they look different. Line 2, natan, no tain, bain, na, amen, na. Remember, this is a silent letter. Na, don. This is also, the aleph is also silent, if you remember. Mi natan et ha Torah. Line 4. Ha more sha'al. Mi natan et ha Torah. Liv ne Yisrael. Reuven ana Moshe Rabbeinu natan et ha Torah liv ne Yisrael. Hamore sha'al mi natan et ha Torah le Moshe. Just a reminder, the dot up there is doing double duty. It's the dot for the shin and the o vowel sound for the mem. Shimon ana Elohim natan et ha Torah le Moshe. And here's from the Passover. Dayenu. Line 9. Ilu natan lanu. Natan lanu et ha Torah. Et ha Torah natan lanu dayenu. Dai, again, the yud here is not really in a consonant. It's part of the vowel, and it changes. In this case, it changes the sound of the a to I. Dai, dayenu, dai, dayenu, dai, dayenu, 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 dayenu. Okay, here the word natan means gives. Bnei Yisrael. Okay, we talked about Am Yisrael. Here's Bnei Yisrael. It's literally children of Israel. And there's some names: Ruvain, Shimon, Anna. Sha'al is ask. Anna is to answer. I think we did this last time because I remember going through that Dayenu and Adonai, and here are some versions of God's name written out. Sometimes it's Yud Yud. Sometimes it's spelled out Adonai. The Yud, Hey, the Vav, and Hey, the vowels are similar to the word Adonai, to remember that it's Adonai. Here's the O, here's the and the a vowel sound with the silent, so it's represented by the silent vowel here. Let's skip this. I want to get to some more letters. Maybe we did this. Okay. Well, anyway, this is a samech. Makes the S sound. And it's easy to remember. Circle. So here's one is sa, se, say, si, so, su. And here we're going to skip this. Here they're just pointing out. You notice that the samech, the s, is a circle, whereas the final mem is a square. Sometimes people get those two confused, because if you don't make the mem exactly like a square, it's easy to think it's a samech. But of course, this will only appear at the end of the word. This can appear at the end of a word too. But and here's the other. This is a sin, so it's like a s. They have this in here for Ashkenazic readers. They would pronounce this as s, but we pronounce it as t. Okay, line 3. Seter, satar, soter, sidur, seder, salim. Right? Seder is what we have at Pesach, and a sidur is what we pray out of. Line 4. Susim, sod, sodot, sisu, mas, misim, sav, sidur, li sidur, gadol. Here's that gimel. Got the gap in it. A little confusing. It can sometimes be confused with the. Where's the nun? Of course, it's here. They don't have a nun. Okay. Well, anyway, sometimes we get confused with the nun. It's got a gap. Line 7. Gam le'aba sidur gadol. Gam le'ima sidur gadol. La saba sidur, gam la savta sidur. Yeah, I think last time we mentioned Saba, that's what my Jack calls me, and Savta is what he calls Lizzie. So that's grandfather and grandmother. Line 10, Elohim ata seter li. 11, V'hu nisi umanos li. That's from Adon Olam. 12, Le'olam yehe Adam. Le'olam yehe Adam yirei shamayim. Beseter uva galui. Again, a reminder, just there aren't too many examples of this, but whenever you see an u at the end of a word with the yud next to it, it changes the vowel a little bit. It turns it ui, uva galui. Umo de al ha emet, vidover emet bilvavo. And then the box here, sur mera, turn, to avoid evil, turn from evil. It's the whole phrase is sur mera ve'ase tov, turn from evil and do good. All right, so I don't think we did this letter. This is the Zion, z, zigzag. See, because Zion looks a lot like the Vav. The Vav, which was very straight. Here it's in the vowel form, but it's very straight. Zion is in a zigzag. All right. za, za, ze, ze, zay, z, z, zo, zot, zu. Zayit, zaz, vav. So you notice the difference? How the zayin is a little, has some movement in it, whereas the vav is straight. O, zer, zera, ezra, mazon, zariz, vize. Mezuzah, mezuzah. That's what, of course, we put on our doorpost. It actually means doorpost, but we now call the box with the scroll in it a mezuzah, which goes on the doorpost. Ve'azi, izuz, zan, avaz, zuz, zayin. Okay, again, zayin, it looks a lot like the nun here, the final nun, but notice the final nun goes below the line. Zayin's got that zigzag to it. Mizuzah. Line 5. Ha mo re sha'al. Mizeh. Yosi ana ze more. Ha more sha'al. Mizot. Yosi ana zot mora. Again, you know, we've talked about this. So there's masculine and female forms in Hebrew. Ze is this, the word this. Zot is also this, but ze is masculine, zot is feminine. So ze more, a more is a masculine teacher. Zot mora, feminine teacher, female teacher. Hamore sha'al, maze. Yosi ana ze sidur. Hamore sha'al, mazot. Yosi ana zot Torah. Hamore sha'al, mazot. Yosi ana zot mizuzah. So here you can see ze, again, the masculine form. Sidur is masculine. I mean, it's like other languages, you know, where you have masculine, feminine distinctions. Sidur is in the masculine form. Torah, mizuzah are feminine forms. Usually, it's not always, but usually the at the ending signifies feminine, and the hard consonants at the end signify masculine. Not always, but more often than not. Let's see, what's the phrase here? Torah tehei emunati ve'el shaddai be'ezrati. All right, let's, I want to make sure we get through all the letters. Here we go. Here's the kaf and the chaf. We'll do that. We'll finish up with that tonight. Kaf. Okay. So kaf makes a k sound. Again, they're using the C. Unlike the C for circle, which was the samech, here it's ka, the C as catch, because it's catching a little ball. Okay, because we're going to see if you take that ball out, it's going to sound a little differently. This one also, you have to be careful that you don't get confused with the nun. Here, if you look on line 3, Knesset, see, the kaf has a longer arm than the nun, but it's very easy sometimes to get confused. So the longer arms are ka, shorter nun. All right. Ka, ka, ke, k, ku, ko, ki, ki, ko, ku. All right, let's go down to line 2. Kabed, kavod, kibud, bakos, kova, kol. And line 3, Knesset, Knessia, Kivuda, Gidula, Givura. All right, well, this is a word for synagogue. Beit Knesset. Knesset means to gather, a place of gathering. A Beit Knesset is a place where people gather. Harabi ba el Beit HaKnesset. Abba ba el Beit HaKnesset. Hadod ba el Beit HaKnesset. And Hayeled ba el Beit HaKnesset. Everybody's coming to the Knesset, the Beit HaKnesset. Everybody's coming to the synagogue. Ba is coming. So we had Abba, we had the rabbi, Abba, Hadod, uncle, child, Hayeled. Number 9 is Hashamash notain liyeled sidur. Here they translate Shamash as the sexton. We would probably call it the Gabbai. Basidur katuv kol hanishama te halel ya hallelujah. Kol hanishama te halel ya hallelujah. Let everything that breathes, call the neshama. Neshama is a breath. Everything that breathes, praise God. Hallelujah. This is the very last line of the book of Psalms. Let's see, where's the chaf? I want the next one. Here we go. Okay, this is the last one we'll do tonight. So it was ka if you have a ball in there because you're catching the ball, but here it's chutzpah. I can't remember if we haven't had a chet yet, have we? I don't think so. But here's the sound. This is a unique sound. It takes a little practice to get used to saying it because we don't have it in English. But it's not cha. It's a problem when you put the ch together because we have ch in English, but it's cha, 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 che, che, chi, cho, chu, chu. Ka, cha, kamocha, chamocha, kul, chem, kivo, dechem, kichlot, hakol. Lechu vanim shimuli. Line 4. Lechu vanim shimuli. Yirat Adonai ala medchem. Lechu v'nelcha be'or Adonai. Line 7, Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo. That's the beginning of the Ashrei that we say on Shabbat. Adonai ba shamayim heichin kis'o u'malchuto bakol mashallah. Ki ladonai even though you've got two words here, La and Adonai, it's pronounced Ladonai, not La Adonai. You just combine the As. Ladonai, Hamilucha, Umoshel, again, that's doing double duty. Umoshel, Bagoyim, Hakol, Havu Godel, Lelo Heinu, Utenu Chavod La Torah, Diracheha Darchei Noam, V'chol Nitivoteha Shalom. And a nice little phrase here, Ezehu Michubad, who is worthy of respect, because kavod is respect. Hamichabed et habriot, one who shows respect or honor to others. All right, so, I see, we're getting into the chaz now. Okay, well, we got a few more letters to go, but we'll certainly finish this up before we are done with our lessons. Okay, so I don't know if anybody has any other questions or questions about the future weeks, but glad to have all of you here with me. And everybody have a good night. All right.
Good night.
Good night. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Hope to see everybody on Shabbat.
Thank you.
Good night. Take care.
Good night, Rabbi.
Good night.